Hello, everyone. Welcome to Learn the Game, where you learn if you got an F for effort. Uh, Today, we're going to be talking about Bernard King. What if he didn't get injured? The king before LeBron James. Before we get into that, Rex, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing well. Still a lingering cough, which will interrupt the show occasionally, I'm certain.
All right. With this said, Bernard King, fantastic player within the mid '80s, came into the league in I think 1978, if I'm not mistaken.
77, 78, I believe, yeah.
Yeah, had multiple injuries just as he was getting into his prime. Had people such as Larry Bird and Reggie Miller claim that he was the best small forward in the league, even at the times that they were playing.
Dr. J as
Uh,
well.
and Dr. J. What are your thoughts on Bernard King? Do you think that he really was the king before LeBron James and his capability as a player?
Yeah, he was one of my favorite players when I was growing up. Um, he was from that same ilk as Mark Aguirre, Kelly Tripucka, Adrian Dantley, king of the mid range. You know, Adrian Dantley told me once, you know, coaches teach perimeter defense and they teach post defense. That area in between, learn to play there. And that's basically every small forward throughout the 70s and early 80s. That's where they played. And I always thought he had the most explosiveness of any of those players that were hitting their height at that time. Uh, what I think might have led to a lot of his injury issues, though, was he had a mentality that his father was a working man and a garbage man or something to that effect, where you know he taught Bernard, you work, it's your full time profession. You work. So King would work on his game 8 hours a day, 5 days a week,
Wow.
40-hour work week, practicing basketball. Well, that's a whole lot of wear and tear. And I think in the end, when it got to the second half of his career, is with his explosiveness, his and the if you ever see his moves, you can see the power in his drives when he would his first step and him going to the basket. He was literally just so strong and would overpower guys and literally shoot directly over top of their heads, right in their faces. And that was
What about
that was something.
what about his intensity? So I watched a documentary on him last night just to get a little bit more spun up on him. It seems that he was famous for having a grimacing stare when he was playing. He wasn't very conversational. Where do you think that came from, and what
Same
effect do you
thing.
think that had on his game?
Same thing. It was his job. And that's how he looked at it. Multiple interviews he'd talk about, especially one from about 10 years ago. I think it might have been longer than that now, on ESPN Classic, where he mentioned about it was his job. This is how he supported his family. This is how he made his money. He wasn't out there just to play basketball, have fun with friends. That's not why he was there. It was a very serious issue. It's how he made his money, and he made a lot of money. So he was always very serious.
Yeah. But do you think it was only just his internal attitude? Do you think it was anything in respect as a purposeful intimidation factor? Do you think he was just inside his head,
Well, no,
and that's what came
that's
out?
the type of guy he was. He was a physically imposing person and had a very in your face style of play. You, in a way, kind of like Barkley, but Barkley had a real playful side as well. Bernard was business.
Do you think he was? a better player than Larry Bird at the time when they were playing together? I know there was the injury layover, but just in respect to when he was at his best and Larry Bird was earlier on in his career, do you think he was better than Larry Bird?
No, he was not better than Bird. Uh, he was better at his specific job. He had a more defined role than Bird did. Bird did everything. Bird was an all around player. Bernard's job was to score, put a
Yeah,
hurting on you, and that's what he did. He wasn't expected to pass like Bird. He wasn't expected to average 10 rebounds a game like Bird. That's but what his job was, it's like Andrew Toney with Philadelphia. When you go back and you look at the two guards from the 80s, obviously Jordan is number one mentioned. Drexler, earlier in the decade, Gervin, and you usually don't hear anyone mention Andrew Toney till a lot later. But there was a period of a couple years where Andrew Toney torched every other shooting guard in the league.
yeah,
Just, Moncrief, didn't matter. He torched them. No one could cover him. He was the man. He only had a very specific job, though.
yeah,
And that's where I always tell people, there's usually only, if there's 30 teams in the league now, back then there was 23. If there's 23 teams in the NBA, that means at most you have 23 team leaders. Every other player in the NBA is a role player. But sometimes your lead player is a role player, depending on the coaching style.
What do you think about the when Bernard King joined the New York Knicks and then Patrick Ewing coming to the New York Knicks? How do you think that team would have went if, and everything went well otherwise, if Bernard King did not get injured? Do you think that they would have competed against the Lakers, the Celtics, the Pistons, and the Bulls during that time? How effective do you think the next team could have been if Bernard King didn't get injured? Again, all things said to go well otherwise.
Well, I've always believed that. And that's basically why Ewing ended up in New York. Bernard King basically by himself. I mean, the center was, for part of that time, was, what's his name that ended up, Cartwright. Cartwright was averaging 20 and 10 for New York with Bernard King. And actually became the leading scorer for the Knicks when King was out, the year before Ewing came in. Okay, well, they were, the year before when King got hurt, he played 12 playoff games that year and averaged 35 points a game in the playoffs and was just handing it to Bird, handing it to Dr. J. You had young Dominique Wilkins in the East at that time as well. And no one could handle King when he hit his prime. And the idea of putting a center like Ewing, who up to that point was being considered the next Bill Russell, the rebounder, the defensive intimidator, and scoring wasn't a big part of Ewing's game. They thought put him, that defensive center and rim protector of that caliber, with a scorer like King, they're already pushing the teams in the East to 7 games. And he's doing it basically as the only serious offensive threat. Give him someone like Ewing coming out of Georgetown, and this is a real powerhouse of a team. But then King gets the debilitating injury, and then everything falls on Patrick. Patrick has to carry the team, and then he hurts his knees as a young player and then played basically 15 years with messed up knees. It was like if neither one had gotten injured, that's a really formidable. And then once you get a formidable core like that, you end up getting better coaches coming to the team. You end up getting free agents coming because
Yeah.
they see what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. With that said, I mean, do you think that how long do you think that run could have went? Do you think that they would have been the team as dominant as the Bulls? Do you think it would have been competitive with the Bulls with Michael Jordan, or how do you think that would have laid out in respect to that '90s run? And do you think that that Knicks team could have made deep runs in the '80s, just to get a little bit more specific?
Well, I mean, it was a turning point, and the turning point comes that if those two do get together and they are even moderately successful, if they get a key playoff upset against Boston or up and coming Detroit, right? One of those teams, then, do they change their, excuse me, does ownership change their mind about Phil Jackson? And does Phil Jackson, the Nick, the guy that won 2 championships as a player with the Knicks, does he coach the Knicks instead of Chicago?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that do you think how how big of a possibility do you think they would have accepted the triangle offense? Do you think they would have? Now, Tex Winter, I know, was really the large architect to that. Do you think similar? Do you think Tex would have went to New York with him? Do you think? How do you think that whole thing would have panned out? Do you think they still would have played that same style with Phil Jackson, or do you think Phil Jackson would have just been there as a, a personality manager? Is also most
Personality
very famous
manager. I
for him.
think that I mean, Tex Winter was already in Chicago before Phil Jackson.
Yeah.
And, Reinsdorf, brought him in, wanted him brought in to teach the triangle. But the problem was Collins didn't want to run it.
Yeah.
He wanted Michael to play on the ball, to be the point guard and be the main man point guard like Isaiah, like Magic, and of that ilk of player.
Mm-hmm.
Reinsdorf thought this is our cash cow, and that's way too much. You're putting way too much on him. He already missed almost a whole season with a broken foot. We need something that distributes the ball evenly. And what they did, if you look at the numbers, when the triangle was implemented, Jordan kept his same statistics, his same scoring, but he actually touched the ball a minute and a half less. He had the ball in his hands a minute and a half less per game.
Gotcha.
Okay, over the course of a season, that's a lot. And when it was in his hands, he was in scoring positions. It's not, if he's playing point, you're putting a lot of mileage on your best player. Just bring the ball up the court.
Yeah.
And that's, under pressure. And that's not what you want. So I don't know whether Tex would have jumped to New York if he wasn't being listened to and they couldn't get a coach that would do what Reinsdorf and Krause wanted. Then who knows? Maybe Tex Winter, maybe they just outright make him the head coach, and maybe he has 6 championships in Chicago. Who knows?
Yep.
These are all what ifs. That's
absolutely.
what the show is called, Bernard King, What If,
Yeah.
But that's the thing is his injury, when the hottest player in the league goes down with a devastating injury, the ripple effect, the butterfly effect is monumental.
Yeah.
And what's funny is that, King blew his knee out trying to block a Reggie Theus dunk.
Yeah.
In Kansas City.
I watched the play of that. It was pretty awkward. He kind of just planted, and even said as much as that he planted his knee into the ground, and that's when he tore his ACL. Just watching it, it's like, why did you
Well, he didn't just tore
Catch
his
yourself up
ACL.
like that.
He
Uh,
completely obliterated his knee.
yeah.
It was torn ACL, torn meniscus, and something else. Also,
Mm.
and it actually fractured the top of his shin bone, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah, he had a fracture in there as well. That's why I think it was the 8 hours a day of practice throughout his life that caused it. Because I believe if you research that fracture, I believe that's actually a stress fracture from overuse.
Yeah. With Bernard King, now again, not a direct real comparison of how they played, but he was able to do all these things. Do you think that LeBron James, do you think he still would have had the moniker the King or King James if Bernard King was as successful as he potentially could have been over the time? Because LeBron James famously now is known as King James. People use that moniker for him. So, do you think that that kind of would have been retired in its own kind of way? Do you think that do you think LeBron James would have used that terminology? It's obviously it's a real easy one in respect to the king that had the certain edition of the Bible, but do you think it would have been left alone?
No, I think he still would have had it because I think there's a generation in between there.
Mhm.
The people that grew up and made famous, King James, which I believe he got when he was still in high school. Uh, Bernard King's career and his brother Albert, their careers were over at that
Yeah,
point. Their return, they were not in the quote unquote casuals phone book. You know,
yeah.
nobody remembers. I mean, if I asked you, who was Mr. Clutch?
I mean, I got an answer. Um, you could say Jerry West.
Jerry West had the nickname Mr. Clutch, but so did Sam Jones.
Yeah,
So, and they played literally against each other
yeah,
in multiple finals. I mean, and they both had the same nickname. In basketball, I don't think it's that big of a deal. It's not played up as in other sports because of the playground nature and the beginnings and the evolution of basketball. Really, nicknames are a huge part of the game, and a lot of guys, like I always hear people talk about, one of Jordan's nicknames was Black Jesus. It's like, well, that was, that was actually Earl Monroe 20 years earlier.
yeah.
They the same nicknames get reused and tweaked and all that type of thing. So I don't think it would have been, nom de guerre. It wouldn't have not have existed. It may not have had the singular meaning that it has at this point.
Where would you put Bernard King as his career happened? But first, before we get into this, we've got a decent amount of people watching. We haven't seen any comments, but please drop the link onto the comments. If you want to be part of this conversation, please call in. We want to hear your perspective. We want to have a dialogue with you about your thoughts on Bernard King and what could have been. Is he was he really the king before LeBron James? That was his moniker. In the photo, he's got a crown on. Please call in. We want to hear your perspective. But in respect to this, Bernard King, where do you have Bernard King all time in respect to small forwards? Has everything panned out? I know you don't like to do rankings, but where do you think he generally lies in that aspect?
Well, that's what I'm trying to look at right now because I didn't want to leave anybody out. So that's literally what I'm doing this very second. I don't want to leave any names out. So I'm trying to get you know what I mean?
Yeah, full list.
Yeah, get
I While you're doing that, I think that Bernard King is. I think he might be a top 10 small forward, but he's definitely a top. I think he's definitely a top 15 or 20 small forward. Um, but there's so many guys at the small forward position that I
yeah,
I I don't
yeah.
think he's a top 5. Maybe a top 10
No,
if you're nice.
I mean, it's the whole peak versus longevity argument, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because of the injuries, he only really had like 4 or 5 healthy, good years, not to mention early on alcohol and drug addiction when he was young in the league. A rape case in Utah that took him off the team and then traded back east, or actually traded to Golden State. Then from Golden State, he went to the Knicks for Michael Ray Richardson, who they were getting rid of Michael Ray Richardson because of his drug issues. So you have all of that, but during his time, when healthy, he was really right behind Bird and Dr. J.
Yeah.
No one else at their peak, even Adrian Dantley, who but for those that are watching who don't know, I am an outrageously huge Adrian Dantley fan. He was more effective than Dantley, than Aguirre. Dominique became better after King's injury, but at the time when King was in his prime, he was better than Dominique. It's just his style of play. You really don't know. He had a move where he'd go in the lane and he's going sideways across the lane, and he would stop once again, all the pressure on that knee. He'd stop and turn to the basket and square so strong and so fast that it would force contact with the defender who's trying to keep shoulder to shoulder with him, and they wouldn't be able to stop the momentum. And he would just clock so many defenders in the cheek with his shoulder, and then would bring the ball up straight into their arms to where they get called for the foul because they're essentially just slapping into his arms, but they could never knock the ball away from him. And he'd score that 8-foot to 10-foot, runner like that. And that move, I used that move on the playground. I couldn't use it in real basketball games because I'm a little point guard. So it just, didn't work for me in real games, but on the playground, I could use it. And then I taught it when I was a coach. And I mean, he was just so strong. He beat you. He would get the better of you in a game because he would beat you up when he was on offense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was a very physical offensive player, without being dirty or just a bull in a china closet. It was all it was well-practiced moves that were meant to create contact, to get foul calls, but also to punish you for trying to stay with him.
Yeah, watching some of his clips when I watched the documentary, that's exactly what it seemed like he would do. He would get contact, or if he knew he was getting beat in a certain direction, he would switch directions and he would still regain contact, and he would slip under the defender in some capacity when they got their arms up, and you could just tell that he knew exactly where to go. He knew he was one step ahead of the defense every single time. It seemed like he could do that fadeaway jumper. He could get under to do a layup or a dunk or what have you.
We used to call it the dribble pop.
Okay.
Where you're actually in a post position.
Yeah.
So you're making the defender think you're trying to post. You're trying to get to spin off to the basket. And he would do that, as you mentioned. But he had what we used to call a dribble pop, where he'd dip his shoulder and almost do a jab step, but in a post position. So instead of Jordan's jab step, where he's in the triple threat facing you up and would do a jab step, Bernard King would be turned with his back to you.
Yep.
He would do a quick jab step to get you leaning. And then instead of going the other way and trying to get around you, he'd take a dribble and a step back and a quick pop.
Yeah.
Just pound. And then what I saw in an instructional video, so many people do the dribble, catch the ball below their waist, and then raise the ball up as they turn. What he would do is he'd put the dribble out away from him And as the ball's bouncing, he'd run to the spot, be already turning his hips, do a jump stop, and the ball would come up from the hard dribble, and he would catch it already with the ball at his chest and put it straight up. And it was called a dribble pop.
Yeah, his shot looked kind of awkward, like he didn't have a lot of follow through. It was just a lot of the shots that I've seen in the highlights. Again, I don't want to pretend like I know a ton about Bernard King, but the shot when he would do that or when he got close to the basket was kind of awkward. It just seemed like it was very practiced. I want to get to this comment though. Kirk Jones Jr. I don't want to mess up if that's your first name, but it's the other part when it starts with a K. I'm too young to know him. 93. But I definitely don't believe LeBron is the king of anything, but it sounds like that's who he imitated constantly. So, yeah, I mean, did like to bring it back a little bit, just again, did people consider Bernard Bernard King the king of basketball, or was it really more so a name in comparison to LeBron James? Because LeBron James, a lot of people accept him as being the greatest of all time, or at least the greatest of sometimes, as you've called him at some points. But did people actually at the time, was it a real conversation that he was the greatest basketball player? I know
Not the
we talked.
greatest basketball player,
Mhm.
but the most effective scorer in the game before Jordan. Before
Yeah.
Jordan, this is what younger fans don't understand. And I'm not a Jordanite, Jordan fanboy, whatever you want to call it. He's an all-time great player, one of a handful of iconic players, but there's no such thing as an individual GOAT in a team sport. But Jordan changed the dynamic, and so many people try to explain it, and they don't know. They explain it incorrectly. They'll say stuff like, "Oh, well, Jordan was the first player to like lead a team to a championship that wasn't a big man." No, that's a lie because Isaiah Thomas won the 2 championships before Jordan. He's a point guard. They would say stuff like, well, they changed the rules to make it easy for Jordan. All right, well, we're talking about the NBA, okay? It's not easy for anyone. But the rule changes made it easier for one-on-one, quick, mobile one-on-one players to excel going into the 90s. And as me and Dart were talking about off screen before we started, it actually helped the center position more than it did the guards. It made mobile centers far more effective. You know, Ewing and Olajuwon come in. Then after them comes in Robinson. Then after him comes Shaq. Those really mobile, great footwork big men started to dominate over the guys like Moses Malone and, you know, older Kareem and that generation. The Artis Gilmores. The opening up of the rules, when they say it made easier for Jordan, it actually made it easier for the 7-foot mobile centers more than it did to the men on the periphery. But Jordan took over the title of the most effective scorer, the most dangerous scorer in the game, away from front court players. Bernard King was the most dangerous scorer in the NBA when he blew out his knee. Case in point, I believe he only played 50 games that year, and they still gave him the scoring title because he was so far and away above everyone else. With the rules of today, he couldn't win it. You have to play 65 games. So he wouldn't have won the scoring title, but they gave it to him because it was just obvious to everyone watching that this dude just scores easier than anyone else. But he's a front court player. Bernard King's a forward. And when you talk about the great scorers, Adrian Dantley. Now, Gervin is listed as a 2 guard, but if you actually watch Gervin play, he played a whole lot of small forward. He was a tweener. You know, one of the original swing men. He played both. That was his effectiveness. If you put a bigger guy on him to keep him from driving to the basket, well, then he'd hit the jumper over you. If you put a smaller guy that could cover him out on the perimeter, then he'd go around the smaller guy with those big, long strides and long arms and finger roll you all day. But Jordan was the first guard to be the most dominant, the most dangerous offensive weapon in the league. When Jordan came in the league, it was Bernard King, and everyone knew it. Now, Larry Bird was the MVP. No one thought King, well, some people did think King was better than Bird, but he was a more dangerous scorer than Bird. But Bird did everything.
I want to ask you one question, and then we'll get to this comment. Do you think that how many more scoring titles do you think Bernard King would have won, and why, if at all, if he would have superseded Michael Jordan's, it gotten some of them away from him? Michael Jordan ultimately won 10 in total, just to remind people. But outside of that, as the second part, the follow up through Kirk Jones, he said, so basketball was really more difficult back in the days from what I've seen. Kirk Jones, you're welcome to call up. We love to have the dialogue with you. The StreamYard link is above. Pretty easy to get onto it if you're interested in that. But if you can answer that two-part question.
Well, yeah, basketball used to be way harder. But that's why casual fans of today look back and say, well, those guys, they weren't athletic. They weren't that good. They were very athletic. They were very good. They were just as athletic as players today. What fans so rarely seem to understand is human evolution doesn't happen over decades. Okay, it happens over many millennia. You can go back to Roman soldiers of 2,000 years ago were basically as athletic as Marines of today. Human evolution didn't change. Okay, the rules change. It made what they were allowed to do different. When you have to dribble and you have to keep your hand on top of the ball, that even your fingertips can't go below the equator of the ball, or it's a carry. Let the modern players play that way. See what happens.
What about the scoring titles? How many do you think Bernard King would have won?
I don't know, because do we assume that he still ends up getting Ewing? Because if he doesn't blow his knee out, they're probably making another deep playoff run. Does he get a quality second player? Now, when it fell to Ewing, the Knicks, for Ewing's entire career, never got a competent number two that stayed, that lasted for more than a couple years. So it could have just been the same thing, where if it's just King trying to carry the team, then yeah, he's taking scoring titles away from Jordan. But if they actually are building a team and they get a competent second and even a third, then his scoring goes down and he doesn't win scoring titles. Oh, he was definitely more aggressive than Bird, but he wasn't more skillful. Bird's quite possibly the most skillful player that's ever played. You can't name three players that are more skillful than Bird in the history of the game. See, people get too locked up in Bird's physical appearance and go, well, he's white, well, he's slow. Okay, the guy played on the perimeter at almost 6'10" and was smoking people for a decade. So don't act like he wasn't skillful. Don't act like he wasn't athletic. Just because he didn't jump real high. And it was actually something in Bird's book that made me realize why his physical image is the way it is. If you look at Bird running down court, he runs like a guy playing in jeans.
Yeah.
Right? You're not seeing big, long strides. You're not seeing knees up high when he jumps. You're not seeing what looks like athleticism. And the reason is, if you read his book, Drive, from 1986, he says when he had his growth spurt, he had these little chicken legs that he was very embarrassed by. And he would always play in his jeans. So as he developed his game as a teenager, he played in jeans. He learned to play in jeans. And then as a pro, when you watch him run down the court and make moves, he looks like he's playing in jeans. That's literally what it looks like when you watch Bird make moves. He was actually very athletic.
We got Casual Hoops Head here. Welcome, Casual Hoops Head. Thank you for calling in.
Hey, y'all. Can y'all hear me well?
Yeah.
All right, good. Like you were saying with Bernard King, like his scoring, he was tremendously effective because he's one of only 5 players that averaged 40 points in a playoff series, and he averaged like 42.5 on 60% from the field, and that was against the Pistons in the first round of 84, that 84 run. Went to 5 games in the first round, and he beat the Pistons, who had peak Isaiah, Kelly Tripucka, Lambeer, and all of them. And then he pushed the champion.
In that particular series, if I remember correctly, in that series, King was being covered by, I believe it was Terry Tyler and I can't remember the other guy. Detroit had 2 small forwards early in the 80s that both played together at Detroit University for Coach Dick Vitale in the 70s. And they were on Detroit in the early 80s. And I believe it was because they got smoked so hard in that series that both of them ended up getting traded away or cut.
Oh, wow.
And they got replaced essentially by Tripucka, who was then replaced by Adrian Dantley. They lost Tripucka to the Hornets in the expansion draft, and they had gotten AD. And then because of the riff in the locker room between Isaiah and AD, they traded AD for Mark Aguirre, who was Isaiah's close friend growing up in Chicago, and then they end up winning championships.
But what were you getting at, Casual Hoops Head? I know you were in the middle of describing the series. What were you leading to?
I was going to say in the second round, when he faced the Celtics, which he actually was MVP runner-up to Bird that year, he pushed the Celtics to 7 games. And in game 4, to prevent going down 3-1, he dropped 43 points. And then in game 6, he forced a game 7 by dropping 44. So that just shows how tremendous of a scorer he really was.
Yeah, he was. And if you look at his, I mean, really, when you talk about nicknames, even though his name was King, but if you're going to take someone else's nickname and apply it to Bernard, and I always called him Bernard. I always said his nickname was Bernard the King is what I used to always call him. But really, he was Big Game James before Worthy. If you look at his best games, they weren't on a cold night in an expansion arena,
right?
Playing a team that's 10 games below 500. His biggest games were against the best teams in the biggest crucial circumstances. That's when he played the best.
Right. Yeah, he was really clutch I'm too young to have seen him, but from everything I see, he was very clutch when it came to crucial games.
And against the toughest guys.
Yeah, right.
He always considered it a personal challenge. He had to warrant his paycheck. And he would go out there and he would go full on and not quit for 48 minutes and just beat up the other guy with his offense, not on defense.
Sure, right.
Casual Hoop said, for what you know about Bernard King, how far or how much more appreciated could he have been if he didn't get injured, if he was successful with the Knicks, had these scoring titles? What do you think the ceiling was for him, if you have an opinion on it?
Well, similar to what Rex said and what y'all said as far as the success, if he had won a championship or something like that, like if he did end up getting Ewing or just someone that could be a better star than like Bill Cartwright. No disrespect to him, but if he could have got that, if he could have got even just one championship, that elevates him to a whole new height. But even if he didn't, if he got more scoring titles, even some of them over Jordan, that would have definitely he'd be looked at a lot more as a great scorer than he is right now, because I don't hear anybody talk about how he's a great scorer in the history of the league. And he was so efficient.
A younger fan tell me that Bernard King was a flash in the pan.
Yeah, I wouldn't believe that. I mean, at 28, like, if you think about it compared to LeBron, like, if he got hurt at a similar age, well, he wouldn't have any championships, I don't think, if he got hurt at the similar age with an ACL tear or something like that. So, I mean, I think he would have been able to, and just how he was a big game player, I see no reason why he couldn't have, continued that trajectory.
Yeah, I think thinking about it and what you're saying has made me think it really comes down to the ownership and management of the team and how they build something around him.
Yeah.
Because I think the load that he was carrying, the injury was inevitable at some point.
Right.
Just because of how he played and how they relied on him so heavily. If he hadn't have gotten any help, if his knee hadn't have gone out in Kansas City, it may have gone out in Atlanta in 87. You know what I mean? It may have gone out in Portland in 86. Because, I mean, some players' styles, like when they talk, I've heard people talk, with the whole LeBron Jordan thing, that if Jordan, played, these days, he would have played for 20 something years. Or no, he wouldn't. That his mindset and his body and his style of play was never meant for that. Yeah. Guys have to play the way they play. And not everyone's made to play for 20 years.
Right. That's true.
And Bernard's style of play just wasn't going to last unless he got help. But let's face it, that when you grow the league, when you expand the league as much as they did, when you go from 23 teams to 30, but then at the same time, you're also going from 12-man rosters to 16. You're blowing up the league and bringing in all these players, but that doesn't automatically mean that you have the competent coaches, GMs, and owners to run the teams.
Right.
And so many fans forget that. I mean, he still played for New York, who totally misused Ewing for 15 years after King.
Right.
They learned nothing.
Right.
So I just find it really hard to say, oh, well, if he would have stayed healthy and they would have still got Ewing, man, they would have won 3-4 championships and he would have won 5 scoring titles. I don't think it would have been that.
Right.
My hero was Len Bias. And I firmly believe if he had not gotten involved in drugs, he would have been an all-star. He may have gotten some MVP votes at some point. He would have been a fantastic, but when they say he would have been a rival to Jordan, I don't think he alone. I think he would have kept the Celtics relevant and would have been competition for Jordan as a team for the Bulls. But I think Bias would have been more competition for Dominique and Worthy and Chris Mullin and Pippen. But you get once he dies, and he died so dramatically, I mean, it was like a Greek tragedy, and it blew him up so much that people talk about now, oh, well, if he had lived, then, he would have been getting MVPs and multiple championships and scoring and title. Nah, he wasn't that. He still had weaknesses in his game that at the NBA level could have been exposed. He was a weak defender on the perimeter. He was not a good ball handler. He was prone to making silly fouls on occasion. Same thing all young players do, you know.
Sure, yeah. And people like to overhype whenever something tragic happens to a player. They like to over imagine what that player would have been.
But I would have loved to have seen Bias, a living Bias against a healthy King. Boy, that would have been something to see as a fan of the game. Wow. Not to mention, he probably would have won at least one dunk championship.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he had a 43-inch vertical leap.
Oh, wow.
Actually, as a freshman, he had a dunk in a game. I believe it was against North Carolina, where he did the double pump reverse that Dominique made famous in the dunk contest.
Yeah.
Bias did it in an ACC game against North Carolina, where they upset North Carolina when Bias was a freshman. He did the double pump reverse in the game.
Casual, do you have anything more about Bernard King that you wanted to comment on or ask a question for?
I mean, I guess there's not a whole lot else that I can think to say. I mean, I find it interesting how, though, in that same series with the Pistons, he had his career high playoff points, and he did it in back-to-back games. That's pretty wild to think of. Back-to-back games, he had 46, which was his high. Mm-hmm. But
I saw him score 60 once.
Yeah, Christmas Day, right?
Game. But I was there. I watched him score.
Oh, you were there?
He had 40 at halftime.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was insane.
Yeah, and that's still the record for Christmas Day points 40 years later.
Yeah, he is it still the record? I thought someone just beat it this year.
Didn't
someone just beat it?
I'm not sure. As far as I knew, it was still the record.
I
might be wrong.
It might have been Jokic. It might have been Jokic. Let me look.
Oh, it might have been.
I think didn't someone score 70 or some stupid amount on Christmas this year?
Not this year, and I don't think it was on Christmas.
Oh, maybe I'm thinking of something else. Okay.
No, it's according to the AI overview, it's still Bernard King, called by Will Chamberlain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's his back-to-back record that someone broke.
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
Because he had back-to-back 50-point games.
Oh, okay.
Not only did he score the 50 on Christmas, but he scored like 50-something the next game as well.
Yeah.
But no, he was I really wish players, young guys, could see the styles of play from the 80s and not just they so, you know, the whole we're done with the 90s thing and the whole mid-range is outdated and all of this stuff. And it's like if you guys just watched the skill level involved. Look, I played a long time. My first year out of high school was the year they put in the three. So in high school, I never got to shoot a three. It didn't exist.
Right.
Then we go in the college, and all of a sudden there's a 3-point line there.
Yeah.
You know? And
I don't mean to cut y'all off, but my phone's on 1%, just to let y'all know.
My God.
Yeah.
Hop on your computer
just so I didn't.
Oh, you're good, man. I appreciate it. But with the conversation about somebody this year with Christmas, Jokic had and this is what I was thinking of. It wasn't a 60-point game, but it was a 56-point triple-double with 16 rebounds and 15 assists.
On Christmas. And that doesn't that beat didn't that beat King's record?
No, you were talking about points. 56, not 60.
No, I thought he had all right. I'm confused. I thought he had 50-something on Christmas.
No. It's 60 points.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm confused. Well, like this, I don't do research, guys. I go pretty much off just memory for these things. So I was confusing two different games.
Wilt Chamberlain had a 59 point, 36 rebound, 5 assist game as well. Yeah.
You mean the guy that everyone just writes off like he didn't exist?
Yes, that guy.
Yeah.
Like Shaq's more dominant than Wilt Chamberlain. I've had that debate before.
Which is the most ridiculous take. And matter of fact, I was arguing on something that very topic this morning on YouTube.
Yeah.
Where Barkley said that Shaq was the most dominant player in NBA history. And it's like he's not even top 10. He's not even close.
What's funny is when people try to say that an era is better than another era as if you could play time machine basketball. And it makes no sense whatsoever to say if you put reality into things that Shaq was more dominant than Wilt Chamberlain at least, let alone guys like Michael Jordan or other players too, whether it be scoring or rebounding, like whatever aspect of it. Shaq is not the most dominant player in basketball history, let alone the things he got away with still didn't make him the most dominant player in his time.
Yeah, he had an outrageous 4-year run. That 4 years, you could argue, was one of the most dominant 4-year spans. But even that, it wasn't the most dominant. But still, the young guys, they're going to argue with it. I had somebody. There was a poll. Who's the greatest New York City point guard?
And did they say Jalen Brunson?
No, Stephon Marbury, and what's the one that went to Georgia Tech?
I don't know.
He was there with Dennis Scott, Kenny Anderson.
Oh, okay.
They were saying those guys. I'm like, dude.
What about Clyde Frazier? Yeah.
By far, no one is even close. The greatest New York City point guard is Bob Cousy. No one's even close to him. Not even. You could take the careers of all the others and put together. They're still not better than Cousy.
Yeah.
But I had some kid arguing that Stephon Marbury was far better than Bob Cousy. It's like, dude, just say you don't know basketball and go play tennis, man.
Well, and I bet you he said it was objective. I bet you he said there was no debate for it and that everyone is accepted as fact.
Yeah.
That's my favorite. When people use the term objective across time in basketball, that is my favorite thing to hear because you are just making things up at this point. You're making without evidence.
Bob Cousy was a league MVP. He was the shortest league MVP until Allen Iverson, who then did it like almost 50 years later. No. Okay. He was 8-time assist champion, 6-time champ, 6 rings. Mm-hmm. And for half of those, when he was leading the league in assists, he was also leading the Celtics in scoring.
Yeah.
It's like people just don't know. They have no clue. It just kills me that kids think like no one like dribbled between their legs and behind their back until like 1998. It just cracks me up. Yeah. Oh, one thing that I had thought of, and I did Google it because I wasn't sure, but I wanted to check. But I think it was 1980, Bernard King, Adrian Dantley, and Pete Maravich were all on the same team together.
Nice. Yeah.
I mean, that's like the Buffalo Braves of, I think it was 74, where they had Moses Malone, Tiny Archibald, Bob McAdoo, and I'm forgetting another all-time great was also on that team all together. And it's like, if you only had coaching and management, they're competent enough to keep these teams together.
I forget. Did Moses Malone win MVP his rookie year in the ABA?
No.
I know he won Rookie of the
Mel
Year.
Daniels won, or no, that was the year Dr. J won it, I believe.
Okay.
Or it might have been Mel
But
Daniels that year.
I know he averaged something like 18 and 12 in his
Yeah,
rookie
no,
season.
he's a 3-time NBA MVP.
Tracking, yeah.
78, 79, or no. Yeah, right? 79, 70, no.
He went
79,
back to back
82,
82,
and
83.
83. Yeah, 79, 82, 83.
Yeah.
But then again, it's the whole domino effect. Does he win those MVPs if Bill Walton doesn't have all the injuries?
Yep.
Does he win first? Does he get first team? Does he get all those, the 6 rebounding titles if Walton isn't injured?
Yeah.
Does Kareem get his last MVP in 80 if Walton isn't injured?
Yeah. And even the 78 season, the hold on real fast. Casual Hoop said, "Thank you for calling in. Please call in the future for what if you're interested. We enjoy having people call in. We enjoy talking to you, hearing your perspective, Bernard King.
Absolutely.
You seem very knowledgeable of the series and a general, at the very least, a general appreciation of Bernard King and that time period. So thank you for calling in."
The thing I liked most about Casual Hoops Ed is he came prepared with the numbers. He had looked at the stats, and then he came on and asked, how do these stats translate? And so few, to use his name, casual fans do that. They read the stats and they think that the game is mathematical. And well, stats don't lie. This is what the stats say, so this is what it was. He read the stats. He knew the stats. He had the numbers. But he asked, how did that, transpire in real world, in real time?
Yeah.
How did they translate? And that's really what we're here for, talking about the history of the game. Is it's not just this, the only stat that is real that matters is the final score, because that determines the winner.
Yeah. No, I think that's one thing. That's another thing that I love to hear and respect to the hate that I feel when I hear it is when people call other people casuals, but then they make these ridiculous claims on a sidebar of Shaq was the most objective player of all time or dominant player of all time, amongst other objective quote unquote statements that aren't objective. If you say that Michael Jordan was the most dominant scorer against his contemporaries of all time, then that's a fact with the scoring titles.
Yeah.
If you use that as a metric. But when you just say the 90s was, and now I love the 90s, so I'm just using this as an example. Some people say this, or more recently today, which is today's NBA is more prevalent with this, I would say. Today, this NBA is objectively the best NBA that we've ever seen. And there's no evidence. They provide no evidence. They just say it. They just make a claim and don't try to support their claim. That's ridiculous.
Or the thing that I hate is when they don't understand, when you, first of all, using individual statistics does not give you an objective answer in a team sport.
Yeah.
You can say, okay, Jordan won 10 scoring titles. That's absolutely true, and he earned every one of them, and I believe every one of them was decisive. But he has 10 scoring titles. Wilt has 11 rebound titles. Stockton has 9 consecutive assist titles. Kareem has 6 MVPs. Russell has 11 championships. You just can't take one single statistic and use it as an end-all, be-all. It just tells you part of a story. Like
Yeah.
the difference in the changes in the rules was Michael being so dominant in the 90s statistically directly influenced his team's final record, right?
Yeah.
The steals titles, the scoring titles, the amount of free
Translated to
throws
wins.
he was
Yeah.
having to shoot, which means fouls on the other team,
Yeah.
making guys go to the bench and getting in the bonus, all these things that go on. Before the loosening of the rules, you had guys that were just as dominant who were backcourt players, but it didn't translate to driving the team to a championship because the rules were set up as such that rebounding meant more than any individual stat towards winning championships.
Yeah. I think it's the most important stat, even if,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's arguably now it is, but back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, it was without a doubt the stat that mattered most towards winning. You can go back and look at so many teams back in the day that were average teams or below average teams that would have great scorers and they'd still be below average teams. Then they would add great backcourt players and they're still average teams. They add the rebounding leaders and then they jump straight to championship contenders. Boston Celtics and the St. Louis Hawks. Perfect example. Perfect examples there where before Russell came, they had Easy Ed McCauley, who scored more than Russell, but rebounded far less. They replace him with Russell, who's grabbing twice as many rebounds. Not a couple more, twice as many. Instant championship contenders every year until Russell retires. And, Pettit, he's in St. Louis, and he is usually finishing before Will came, I think he was finishing second, third every year in rebounding.
Yeah.
And their championship level, they were the only team in the 50, once the Russell got there,
I think he's still third all-time points per game for a career, or he's top 5 or something. I think it was averaging like 18 rebounds per game.
Yeah, when you look at the rebounds per game average, he's still, and this is the thing that cracked me up when people talk about pace of the area. Well, they only got more rebounds because of the pace. That's not how it works, guys. Because if you look, you say, okay, well, and I heard someone say, well, his Wilt's 23 rebound per game average for his career, that if you take the average pace, if you put it the same pace as the late 90s, that Rodman grabs a higher percentage of the rebounds. It's like, but you're changing the whole dynamic. You're changing the game to get that result. So it's invalid. You can't change the game. What happened is what happened. And just because there are more rebounds available doesn't mean that one guy is going to get them all. If you take out, obviously, Russell and Wilt and Pettit and, say, Thurman, you take these guys out. Everyone else was getting the same number of rebounds that they get now on an individual basis. Everyone else
had this up the whole time.
What?
Anyway, sorry. I should have had this picture up the whole time, but I didn't.
No.
Anyway.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If it's just a matter of, oh, well, they had more rebounds to get, so that's why they had so many rebounds. No, only 4 or 5 guys had that many rebounds. Everyone else's rebounds were the same.
Yeah.
Tommy Heinsohn, second best front court player on the Celtics. His career averages were like 18 points and like 9 rebounds a game.
Yeah.
Which is the same as the guys in the 90s, the top power forwards.
Let's see, 1963. I don't know if it's the in 1963, the average team or the average was 66.7 rebounds per game. Let's do 1998 or something. I think that's one of the slowest. Okay, they roughly average 45 rebounds per game. So 66 to 45.
No, but you're giving the team stat.
Yeah, yes, the team stats. Yes. I'm talking about the team stats.
But a rebound is not a team stat. When you count, you know, when you're talking about individuals, this is why this is the biggest problem with, then to use the term again, casuals arguing across different eras is so many of them, ones that we know well, especially, just slide back and forth from team stats to individual stats like they're the same thing. And they're not. Yeah. When you sit there and you say, well, the league average was 66, right?
Yeah.
That's the league average. Okay, well, you had teams like the Celtics and then depending on what year, 63. So the Warriors, well, they had one guy getting 25 rebounds a game. How much does that skew that league average of 66?
Yeah.
People want to say, you have these kids that say, well, the 2000s was the slowest era. Okay, well, in 1950, there was a game that finished 19 to 18. So tell me again about the slowest era shit.
Yeah.
You got no idea. You don't know. You're just making stuff up because it's what you heard somewhere. You didn't go back. Like they'll say, you know, people argue, well, Hakeem is actually the greatest center ever because his two-way play, he's the all-time leading shot blocker. Well, really, he's not. And everyone knows he's not. Only young casuals think he is because they look at who has the record. Hakeem's number one. Oh, well, then he has the most. Well, no, they didn't count him for Kareem's first 5 years, I think.
Yeah.
So Kareem actually had more.
And number Thurman, 2, right?
Yeah, Thurman probably had more. And then we know Russell and Wilt obviously had more. But it wasn't an official stat. Sometimes they kept track. Sometimes they didn't. Yeah. But in the games they did keep track, Wilt averaged 8.8 blocks per game and Russell averaged 8.2, which are both career averages that are twice almost what the single season record is.
Yeah. Is that Mark Eaton?
Yeah, 5 at 5.
Yeah.
And it's like, you kids don't know. They didn't have that when they say, well, this guy, you know, Mikan isn't anywhere near the top. He never won an MVP. Well, they didn't have the award until the year after he retired.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
They didn't have the award. That's why that's one of the arguments I have when you say you can't count individual statistics because they weren't all around. So if MVP is so telling as to who the best is, how did the league get on for 10 years without having one?
Now, I do got to say, I think it's one of these things where it does not really, but in respect to the icon or the eminence, when you make a designation for something, you can attach greatness to it. It doesn't mean that Mikan wasn't great or Mikan wasn't, by most people's standards, clearly the best player in the league for quite some time in the 40s and 50s. I do think over time, though, once you attach these titles or these awards or whatever capacity it is, it does start bringing greatness to whatever that is supposed to determine. Now, does it mean that, like to your point, does Hakeem having the most blocks in NBA history, does that mean he's the greatest blocker? No. Even if he won a couple blocks titles and et cetera, it doesn't mean it because of what we've been discussing. So I think they're two separate things that do often get misconstrued with each other, especially when people try to make arguments. A lot of people will be wish-washy with it, or at least not admit that there are these circumstances surrounding it.
Yeah. Well, just like, when you talk about all-star appearances.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, when the league had 8 teams, you had 11-man all-star teams.
Yeah.
When the league had 23 teams, you had 12-man all-star teams. And for many decades, there was the rule that every team had to be represented when the league was smaller. So you would have guys that were clearly all-star level players, couldn't make the all-star team because they already had 2 teammates who were going to the all-star game, and the Bullets or the Royals or somebody had to have a player in the game. So their best player would automatically be designated an all-star because every team had to be represented. So guys that deserved it would be left out, and guys that didn't deserve it would get in.
I just think it's funny you took a shot at your own team first.
Well, that's because that's how I found out about that rule. That's how I found out about that rule when I was a kid. When only one bullet was put in the all-star game, and it was like over so-and-so. Yeah. And then you find out, oh, well, every team has to be represented. So that's why this player ended up in the all-star game.
I didn't know that. That's a first heard for me. When that rule got nixed?
I don't remember how all of it went about. It was back when the league needed representation.
Yeah.
When you were trying to advertise the league, once the big money hit, once the cable contracts hit, all of those funky rules were out the window.
Yeah.
When the best thing is when young kids sit there and talk about, want to argue whether or not the draft is rigged. It's like the draft has always been rigged since the first draft.
Yeah.
They literally had territorial picks.
Yeah.
It's like if you want to sit there and say, okay, who was the first pick in the 1956 draft? You literally could give like 3 different answers.
Yeah.
Because you had the first real pick, the guy that was known as the first pick. But he was actually not the first pick because Tom Heinsohn was allowed to be taken by Boston as a territorial pick because he played at Holy Cross before the draft actually took place.
Yeah.
And then they had the trade going on for Bill Russell, who everyone knew was the best player, but because of racial tensions, he was not going to be the first pick.
Well, that was my question with that, because he played in San Francisco. How now I know they didn't have a team out there. Was St. Louis just the closest place of why he got drafted to St. Louis?
No, they had the first pick.
Okay. So territorial was kind of like similar to, I'm not saying exactly the same way.
They didn't always give you territorial picks. Only when the league decided it would help the league, you got territorial. Gotcha. Wilt Chamberlain was a territorial pick.
Gotcha. Okay. I thought it was I didn't.
Yeah, the Warriors didn't have the first pick that year.
Yeah.
But they gave a territorial pick so Wilt, who grew up in Philadelphia, could play in Philadelphia because you'd pack the seats.
Yeah.
Look at LeBron James leaves, goes to Miami, and all of a sudden the Cavs end up getting like the first pick in the draft 3 of the next 4 years. It's literally been figured out mathematically that that's more than a 1 in a billion chance of happening.
Yeah.
Why did it happen? Because the league was repaying them. How did the Mavs get Cooper Flag? They had like a 1% chance with the ping pong balls. How'd they get it? Because they agreed to let Luka go to LA.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always been manipulated. The whole frozen envelope for Ewing going to New York. You know, you got to look at this. You had on one coast Bird in Boston. You had on the other coast Magic in LA. Right?
Yeah.
Then you get not the next year, but the year after, you get Isaiah in Detroit. And then you get Dominique in Atlanta. Now, these are the premier players for the next decade. You think they all accidentally just ended up at each individual team?
Yeah.
You know? It's like Ralph Sampson goes to Houston. Ralph Sampson ends up being right from after, even though he was Rookie of the Year and all that, it was obvious if you watch the games, he's not going to be the answer. So Olajuwon comes out of University of Houston a year early. He miraculously goes right to Houston, where his hometown fans are.
I believe in the Easter Bunny.
Yeah. So. Ewing goes to New York. Mullen goes to San Francisco. You know, you think all this happened by accident? That none of these guys were able to team up? I mean,
what about with Bernard King? Do you think they specifically traded him to New York because he was attached to New York, or is it
that's very complicated. To get back to the whole but that's why New York wanted him.
Yeah.
But in Utah, he was up on rape charges. He went to Utah. He only played 19 games. He was up on rape charges. It ended up getting plea bargain to a lesser charge. He was pulled over with cocaine in his car, all that type of stuff. The NBA at the time. It's not saying, that it was almost it was almost like common practice at that point.
Yeah.
But ironically, one of the reasons he ended up in Utah was because the GM at Utah was Frank Layden, who went to the same high school as Bernard King in New York.
Yeah.
So they had a rapport. Basketball was a small circle back then. In college, he was part of the Ernie and Bernie show at Tennessee.
Yeah.
That was the pinnacle of Tennessee basketball, which was a football school. So for them to have a really great basketball team, it was big news. And it was Ernie Grunfeld and Bernard King. Ernie and Bernie show. Both of them from the streets of New York. Go down to Knoxville and have a really good nationally ranked team the whole time they were in college. Well, Grunfeld went to New York. Grunfeld played in New York. Grunfeld then ran the New York Knicks. He may even still be associated with them in some capacity. I'm not sure. But so you had friendships involved. Yeah. In Utah, when he got to Utah, Adrian Dantley had come from, I believe, LA. And from being second, third fiddle, playing behind Kareem and all that, then going to Utah, he became the man, ended up a couple scoring titles, which meant, he played the same position as King. So it meant King wasn't getting playing time. He had the legal issues. He was having personal, addiction issues. So they got him out of there. He got comeback player of the year when he was with Golden State. And once they saw that he had recovered, he had gotten his game back, his life was getting sorted out, then New York wanted him. He was actually drafted by New York, but he was drafted by the New York Nets. But his rookie season was the year they moved to New Jersey.
Gotcha.
So he was a hometown draft pick originally. But a lot of off the court stuff really messed up his early career. Once he got settled in with the Knicks, he really hit his stride when he was over his personal issues and everything got sorted out off the court. On the court, he exploded, and he was a monster until the injury. And then what's funny is he almost became, I believe, I don't know if it's happened since, but he was almost a two-time comeback player of the year winner.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I saw the stats. Yeah.
Yeah. When he came back with the Bullets and became an all-star with the Bullets, he almost got comeback player of the year again. And I believe he might have lost out to his teammate. I think Purvis Ellison might have won it that year.
Yeah.
Who was the center for the Bullets at the time. But after starting off in Sacramento. But yeah, he has the most enigmatic career of any player in NBA history. The lows were low and the highs were high. And he hit every point along that spectrum.
Yeah.
It was truly such a crazy, crazy career.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's just a footnote these days.
Yeah.
But to see him if he played today, it would, for one thing, don't know because of the rules changes how effective his style of play would be today. He'd probably get called for, 3-4 charges a game.
Oh, I don't know. They let LeBron get away with it, but
yeah, but they let Shaquille get away with it too. They normally only let one guy get away with it. Whoever the face they want to be the face of the league gets away with it. Everyone else just has to deal with it.
Yeah.
That's why I always laugh, when they show like Shaq highlights, like the biggest highlight of his career is just plowing into Brad Miller, dunking, and then literally shoving Miller to the ground.
Yeah.
And then Miller getting up and throwing the ball at Shaq and missing him, but Miller getting called for the technical.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing explains Shaq's career more than that, how badly they wanted him to be the face of the league. He literally got away with assault on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And then they show him breaking backboards and busting the hydraulics. And it's like, these are your best plays? Disrupting the game and offensive fouls?
Yeah.
That
is funny.
And the thing is, they actually ruined Shaq's career because Shaq could have been the GOAT.
Yeah.
He absolutely could have been. I believe. When I saw him in college, I honestly thought that's what I was watching. I saw Sampson, and I always thought Sampson would be a really fantastic offensive force. I thought he would have a 30-point per game career average, but I never thought he'd be dominant defensively because of his slender build. And all the centers at the time were bangers.
Yeah.
Except for Kareem, who could bang. That's what people don't understand. Young players don't understand. Kareem was Wemby. Lou Alcindor was Wemby. Yeah. But you couldn't mess with him because he literally could and did on multiple occasions knock people out. The dude trained with Bruce Lee.
He was an MFer in respect to don't mess with him. Like he would. Yeah, he was. And I love the story with him and Wilt, and I know that Wilt in ways mentored him, which is, I love the story where they're in an elevator together.
Yes.
And he's like, some guy asked Wilt, how's the weather up there? And then Wilt spit on his head and said it's raining. And then But ironically, because Kareem would get in fights if he got roughed up on the court or whatever in the games, I just find it funny that Wilt was kind of, in a lot of ways, the opposite of that. That he wasn't as aggressive, but it seems like out on the street, at least with that one story, I don't know how many times that happened, but
no, he regularly stood up for himself in public with strangers. He's extremely kind and generous with people he knew.
Yeah.
He gave, there was lots of times when Kareem would stay at Wilt's apartment and Wilt would give him clothes because Kareem couldn't find clothes that fit. Well, Wilt had all of his stuff tailored. Every outfit he owned was tailored. And he would give Kareem clothes. They didn't become quote unquote enemies because at the time he was a schoolboy. He was a teenager. Yeah. Wilt never saw him as a threat. Then when the NCAA banned the dunk and Kareem had to use, he had the skyhook all through high school. But he used it only some of the time. It was a secondary shot to use if he got stood up in the post. It was a bailout shot. Then when they outlawed the dunk, he developed it as his main offensive weapon. And once he developed that weapon, then Wilt saw what Kareem could become and started feeling a bit threatened and also a bit jealous because Wilt was always Goliath. Everyone always rooted against Wilt. People loved rooting for Kareem for whatever reason. He was very popular. Now, it ended up turning on him because he ended up not liking all of the publicity and everyone in his business all the time. But people wanted to be in his business. People always saw Wilt as the enemy when he really wasn't.
Yeah. But hey, Rex, I think this was a great conversation. I got to get going now, but do you have any last words for the people? Do you have any grades to give out today? We had Kirk Jones Jr. and Casual Hoops said. What would you grade?
Casual Hoops said that was fantastic. He needs to call in much more often with a charged battery.
What about Kirk Jones Jr.?
Yeah, I'm trying to. Is that first name supposed to be a derivative of Keyshawn?
I don't know. I didn't want to. Maybe.
I've been looking at. I think that's pronouncing correctly. But yeah, I like what he put in there as well. Especially the question about was King more aggressive than Bird, or was he more skillful? Because that's a big distinction. See, that's what some people don't understand is everyone has a role, and you can excel at your role, and people think you're a much better player than you are because you're so effective in a role. But then a team will trade for you to make you their main player, and you're not as effective in the lead role. James Harden comes to mind. As a young player in Oklahoma City, they looked nearly unstoppable as that trio, or four if you want to count Ibaka in there. They looked like they were going to rule the next decade. But then they all went to separate teams, and none of them really achieved what it looked like they were going to be able to achieve together with each in a specific role.
Yeah.
Grant won 2 championships and Ibaka won a championship in Toronto. But if they had stayed together, it looked like they were going to be the dominant team for the next decade. And that's where fans need to understand what they're watching and what they're seeing and being able to evaluate a skill set.
Yeah.
Having a player like James Harden as your second or third option is devastating. But his style of play, when you build the whole team around him, he's far too inconsistent.
Yeah.
You know, and the same thing, you take a motor guy like Russell Westbrook, who was probably the greatest motor guy in history. He's getting triple doubles every night, but who is he passing to? It's not resulting in wins and championships. Whereas in Oklahoma City, he was passing to Harden, Ibaka, and Durant, and they were getting to finals as a very crazy young team.
Yeah.
And that's where fans need to understand, you know, super teams don't win. Teams built from scratch win because GMs are going out and looking for specific traits to put into their core for long-term success, as opposed to just going out and buying an. You know me, man. Whenever people put on, okay, build your greatest team, build the best team, and then someone just picks like the greatest offensive player at every position. I'd love to put in the comments, you do realize there's only one ball, right?
Yeah.
You know, like putting Wilt and Jordan together on the same team. Only if it's old Wilt. If you put young Wilt on a team with Jordan, they're not winning anything because they're taking away from each other's effectiveness.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but we got to go. So
absolutely,
that'll be a future show.
For sure. I'm going to put the intro on as the outro, and then I'll be out. Please don't wait for me, Rex, because I got to go. But
yeah, so do I.
For everyone.
I'm at the door right now.
Learn the game.
Rules in action. Rules that keep things going smoothly and fairly. Rules that help us get where we're going. Help us work together, play together, and live together. Of course, in small groups, we sometimes get along without rules. But there aren't any loud noises, just the sounds of working. We call these work sounds. Listen. When many of us play together, rules make the game. Rules help us play fair with each other, so all can enjoy the game. Rules that apply equally to all. It's up to each one of us to know the rules and follow them. Why do you suppose this room is so quiet? Perhaps we can learn from the teacher.
At New York's Madison Square Garden, a city college quintet races by fast and fancy wet boots from the University of Oregon. It's the opening contest of an intersectional doubleheader, and New York scores 2 points worth of first blood.
And you know, we have found that knowing when to be quiet is a part of growing up.
16,000 fans watch the boys from the Pacific Coast as they try to stem the onslaught of City College fever. But it's all over when Silverstein shoots off the hardwood, decades the ball, and the ball game for CCNY 38-36.
Because a quiet room helps all of us learn.
How do you do it?
Well, each of us knows how to work quietly. That's very important.
But the evening sport is a long way from the locker room. In the second game, a team of Northwestern Wildcats is matched against St. John's University of Brooklyn. The lads from Illinois are off to a springboard start when Bob Coble eases the Helen into the basket to take the lead.
Do you think you could walk this quietly? Listen to this work sound.
But tribal warfare comes to the gymnasium as the St. John's Indians retaliate with 2 points. But now on, the game is touch and go, with 10 men helping to get it there. A beautiful display of teamwork, and Northwestern gets in the number column with sharp shooting.